You're never gonna let me down. You're never gonna let me Well, hey guys, welcome to Venture Church. We're starting a new series this morning called Freehand. And as we continue, I invite you to stand and sing with us at whatever level you feel comfortable. You're still the rock that I cling to when everything else falls apart. You're still the one that I'm building on, the reason my hope's never lost. You're the reason my hope's never lost. You come through now like you did back then, time and time and time again. Almighty fortress, mighty defense, time and time and time again. Oh, time and time and time again. Nothing has ever been wasted, 'cause there's nothing that you won't restore. As the waters rise, I lift up my eyes to where my help's coming from. 'Cause you're where my help's coming from. You come now like you did back then, time and time and time again. Almighty fortress, mighty defense, time and time and time again.
Life is busy. Every day we ask questions like, what's happening today? What should I wear? How am I going to fit everything in? But then there are bigger questions like, why am I here? What's my purpose? Where am I heading? Is there more to life than this? These are some of life's big questions, but there's rarely enough time to think them through. That's why Alpha exists. Alpha is a place to explore life's big questions in a safe and open environment. It's a series of sessions where anyone can share their thoughts and opinions and ask questions without feeling judged. When you come to an Alpha, you'll notice that first, there's food. Whether it's a full meal or a light snack, this is the time to get to know each other in a casual setting. Next, you'll watch an Alpha talk. The talks are created to engage and spark conversation. They explore big issues around faith from a Christian perspective. After the talk is a time for discussion. This is the most essential part of any Alpha. It allows everyone to share their own opinions on the ideas presented in the talks. It's a time for people with different thoughts, beliefs, and experiences to ask honest questions and have open conversation. Every week, there are guests coming for the first time to an Alpha in their community. Alpha is for everyone, regardless of background or beliefs. There's no pressure, no follow-up, and it's completely free to attend. Come and explore life's big questions. Find an Alpha near you today.
Well, good morning. Welcome to Venture Church. I'm Jenny. I'm the Next Steps Director here. In case you wonder what the Next Step Director means, I am here for you guys to take next steps. So whether that means you want to get baptized or you want to join a team or whatever that may be, I'm here for you guys to kind of walk with you along that path. But also, if you just need a friend, I'm here for you as well. So just come up to me and say, hey, but that's kind of what I do here. I just kind of connect with people and kind of help you guys along with your journey. So if you're new here, I just wanted to say welcome. There is a guest card in the lobby, or there is a QR code, or on our website you can fill out a guest card as well. That's just a way for us just to get to know you a little bit and just to say hi. We have a small gift for you in the back. If you want to come meet me after church, I would love to give you that. So, as you saw, Alpha is coming up, so we are starting this Wednesday, and I am just so excited. We're going to be downtown at the Claymore, and you guys are probably like, yeah, you've been telling us, but I'm really excited about this, you guys, and if you haven't done this before, I really, really strongly urge you to just come check it out on Wednesday night. There's no strings attached. You can just come and see, and if you hate it, you never have to come back, and I'm not going to chase you down, I promise. But for those of you who have done Alpha, you know how much fun it is, and I really want to challenge you guys to invite at least just one person. If you guys could just think of one person to invite, and bring them along with you. So join us next Wednesday. Even if you've done Alpha before, or you've never done it, anybody. This Alpha launch party next week is for everybody to come. If you've done it, bring your friends with you. If you've never done it, come bring a friend with you then as well. But it's going to be a great time. I'm just really excited to see how God's going to work in this next session of Alpha. And but yeah, if you guys haven't done it before, it's seriously, it's not weird. It sounds weird. You don't know what you're getting into, but it's really fun. And by the end of these weeks, we're all wishing that we could just keep going, and we just gain a lot of good friendships through it. If you're afraid to speak up in a group and that's what's holding you back, don't be afraid of that. You don't have to share anything if you don't want to. Just stay within your comfort level. You're not going to be the only one not sharing if that's what you're worried about. You can say as much or as little as possible, and you can say whatever you want to. Nothing's off the table. So I hope that you guys can come check it out. It's going to be a great time. If you need the sign-up link for it, I have it in the weekly emails, and it's on our social media. But if you don't get those things, just come up to me, and I'll try to help you sign up for it or answer any questions that you have about it. But we are starting a new series, Freehand. So Braden's going to be up in just a minute to share that. But first, we're going to have an intermission. So if you guys didn't get a chance to grab a cup of coffee or some treats out in the lobby, go ahead and do that. And this is a time for you guys to bring your kids to class as well. So we'll see you up here in a couple minutes.
Well, good morning again. Welcome to Venture. My name is Braden. If we haven't met before, I remember being in high school, and as at least the beginning of high school, I didn't have much of a sense of style. And if you're thinking things in your head right now, you don't need to comment either. But I decided somewhere halfway through high school that I wanted to maybe what's the word? Get a makeover, if you will, and develop my own sense of style. And there was one person in particular that I considered a little ahead of me on that front, maybe a little cooler than I was. And I had this idea that he wore certain shoes and certain outfits from a certain store. And so maybe if I wanted to be cool, I'd be like him and go shop there. And so I remember my mom took me shopping, and we went and got some new outfits. And I showed up to school that next day dressed almost identical to this guy that I was trying to be like. And I just got laughed at. Like, you don't have any individuality, any uniqueness. All you're trying to be is a copy of that person. And in that moment, at that time, I swore to myself I would never try to copy somebody else again in my life. I was so embarrassed that I was attempting to be like someone else rather than developing my own sense of who I was supposed to be in the world. And the idea really in our world is everybody wants to be unique, wants to stand out from the crowd. And after copying all the TikTok trends and the Instagram stories and all that stuff, everybody trying to stand out from the crowd is exactly in the middle of the crowd. Like, it's almost ironic when you see somebody get a new hair color or a new fashion sense or a new pair of shoes or whatever. All they end up looking like is exactly like what somebody told them to do online or some video or something like that, especially in our world these days, where we see so many influencers and so many people making claims about who we're supposed to be in the world. There's such a great temptation for us to want to try to stand out, to be unique, especially in our world, in the American system that says we are one unto ourselves and we are maybe our own unique people. Everybody wants to be original, not just a replica of somebody else. But how do we live into that life? How do we develop the creativity to live out the life that God has designed for each of us? And I think about that word freehand that we're using for this series, because I think so often we think, well, I'm just going to kind of wing it. I'm just going to kind of make decisions along the way, or I'm going to try things that I've seen somebody else do. And we hope that we're going to end up with some sort of work of art when it comes to our lives. But the truth is, when it comes to art, creativity, craftsmanship, we can't just wing it. There are skills that we learn. There are practices that we put in place. And there are rules to follow for anybody who is a maker or an artist or a craftsman or a creator in any sense of the word. And in the same way, the Old Testament of the Bible has laid out several rules for us to follow to live into an authentic version of life. And when we talk about rules, oftentimes we kind of shrug against those, or we push against those. Like, I don't like rules. I don't like somebody telling me what to do. And yet, when we follow God's design for our lives, we can live into the unique image He has given each one of us. We don't have to be a copy of anyone else, because God has given us a framework, each of us, for an authentic life. Just like creativity is innate in everyone, but it's expressed through training and practice and discipline, there are rules that guide us into our best life as well. And that's what we're going to be looking at for the next several weeks. The big idea for this series is that creativity flows out of our spirituality. That when we are connected with the creator of the universe, we understand that we are created to be creative. And then it's through that relationship, through that connection with God, that we really grow into the best version of ourselves and the best version of our lives. You go back to the very beginning of the story in the Bible, Genesis 1:26 says this, "Then God said, 'Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground.'" The idea from the very beginning of the book of the Bible, from the very first chapter, is this idea that we have a creative God, that the stars and the moon and the sun and the seas and the land and the animals that walk on it and the people, they're all created on purpose. And they're an expression of God's creativity, but he also gave humans a special role in that. He created us for purpose, to rule over, have dominion over, and authority over everything in this world. And if you think about what it's like to exist as a human in this time in the world and human history, it's both the best of times and the worst of times, isn't it? Like, it's unbelievable to think what we're capable of because of technology and medical advancement and all this stuff. Like, it's such a beautiful time to be alive. That we can connect with people face to face around the world, unlike we could have even dreamed about even a generation ago. Really. We can get anywhere on the planet in a few hours. It's really unbelievable. We're taking organs from one person and transplanting them into a new person and giving that person not just moments of life, but years or decades more of life. It's really unbelievable if you think about the creativity that God has unleashed in the human spirit that we live in this time. And yet we also live in the time in the world where if one thing goes sideways and one person makes one decision, that it might all be over because of our scientific advancements. Like, we're in a political season, right? And we're saying that this is the most important election of our lifetime, right? I don't know how many elections I've lived through, but I'm 39 years old, and I've heard that about every single one of them. You're like, it's kind of lost on me at this point in time, if every single election is the most important one. But it really is important to be mindful of the people that are in charge, not just in our country, but in our world. Because you get one bad actor in place with bad intentions, and they might set everything sideways for us. God has given us the authority over this world, and he's given us the creativity to harness the power that we have for good and for evil in all of the best and worst ways. And what we see is we're not just created to kind of live and breathe and eat and sleep and enjoy life. We are created for creativity. Like, that is something in the human spirit that God has placed in us that is unique in this entire world. As God has given us this purpose, this ability to be creative in our world. And I would go so far as to say you're not living your full human existence if you don't have an outlet for your creativity. If you are just doing what somebody else has told you to do, or if you are just trying to live as a copy of something else, you are not living fully into what God wants for your life. But I have to pause there, because if you're like me, you hear something like that, we're created for creativity, and you think back to your third grade art class, and you're like, I failed third grade art. Like, what are you talking about, this creativity thing? I had this piece of pottery that I made for my mom, must have been in elementary school. I don't know why, but I held on to it for all of these years. And you look at it, and the colors are wrong, and it's kind of lopsided and sagging over, and it's supposed to be some sort of jar, and there's holes in it. It's not going to hold anything. Like, Braden's not so artistic. And maybe that wasn't the way that God created me to be. But we're not just talking in artistic creativity. I can tell you that my 11-year-old has more artistic capacity than I will ever have in my life, and she's only 11. And there's something built into her that's different than what God built into me. but there can be creativity in our work and in our communication and our relationships and the way that we take adventures. And there can be creativity, what we do with our financial resources and all of these different things. Creativity comes in many different forms. Sometimes somebody that's a gifted musician has no ability to paint. Sometimes somebody that is an incredible craftsman can build almost anything, has no ability to sing. But that doesn't mean that creativity is only related to artistic ability in our world. But one of the things that we see in our world, that beautiful things take time and energy and discipline in our lives. That we can't, in fact, just freehand it, just wing it as we go. That if we want to build a life that is beautiful and creative and authentic, there are rules for us to live by and to practice and to discipline ourselves towards. As we're discussing this series several months back, one of my staff members said, "I hate that word authentic." And in part, I understand what she meant, because it's such an overused word that we've even forgotten what it means to be authentic. Sometimes we think authentic just means something like unguarded or unprepared, or I'm going to do or say what I want without worrying about what you think about me. That's sometimes what we mean when we say something like authentic, that I am just going to be the most unguarded version of myself, and I don't care. But what authentic really means is that it comes from an undisputed origin, or that something is genuine. It's the real deal, that it's not a fake or a replicate. And sometimes our authenticity can be so fake because we are just a copy of something else that we've seen or something that somebody has told us in our life. But what if our lives really did have an undisputed origin? That the way that we live, that the rules that we followed for our life pointed directly back to our Creator. That it was obvious why we were living our life and who we are living our lives for. In the New Testament book of Ephesians, it tells us about this incredible relationship that we can have with our Creator that's a gift to us, but it tells us the purpose in that relationship. It says this in verse 8, "For it is by grace you've been saved through faith, and this is not from yourselves, it is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast." Okay, first of all, this relationship with God, it's a gift that none of us can do anything to earn it, achieve it, or deserve it. But it says, "For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do." So God has saved us, redeemed us, made us new, brought us into a relationship with Himself. We can hear from and respond to the Creator God in our world. And it says we've been created so that we might do good works with our lives, that we might express creativity, that we might make an impact in this world, that we won't just live as copies of someone else. I think about the Mona Lisa, the most famous artwork that has ever been made. I've never had the privilege to see it in person in Paris. But what's really interesting about the Mona Lisa, and you think about Da Vinci's care, and it stood the test of time being the most famous piece of art the world has ever known. But in part, what we know about the history of the church, and especially the Renaissance period, and all these things that were formed, in part they were funded by and supported by and expressions of the work of the church in the world. That we see these incredible musicians and artists, painters, sculptors, and all of that. And what they gave the world was a gift of their spirituality. It was their creativity was an expression of what God was doing in and through their lives. And every year, millions and millions and millions of people go to see the Mona Lisa and see what is considered maybe the greatest painting and the most unique painting of all time, see in person. And you know what is the least creative thing in the whole world? Is to standing with you and your family and friends and 1,000 of your other closest best friends in front of the Mona Lisa with your phone trying to take a picture of it. What is that doing? There's millions of versions of this painting online, and so many people desire to prove that they were there to see it. It's like, you will never capture that painting in all its glory on your phone. There are plenty of copies of it online. I'm begging you, if you ever get the chance to go to Paris and go to the Louvre and go and stand in front of the Mona Lisa, enjoy it for what it is. Don't worry about getting on Instagram with your phone proving that you were there. There's a better copy of that already in the world. What I would hope you would do is stand in the moment and appreciate the creativity that was expressed hundreds of years ago in a moment in time that honestly I think our world sorely misses. We're in this digital age. It's so easy to fake things and copy things and just live according to some other principles. We have so few makers and artists in a world that is craving for something authentic, original, the real deal, and genuine. I know for me, when I try to copy something or I try to express my own artwork, it comes out in ugly stick figures, right? And I just don't have what it might take to do that. But that doesn't mean I don't have what it might take to live a one-of-a-kind life, one in relationship with God. And He's given us rules to live by. Because Da Vinci didn't just wake up one day and start putting paint on canvas and end up with this. It came through time and practice and discipline and rules and the layering and the way that paint interacts with different paint and canvas and all these things. The truth is, and he's going to be uncomfortable with me saying these, but Jimmy is our drummer, and you see him back there most Sundays, and he's one of our resident tattoo artists. I don't know what it is about Venture Church or previously the north side of Journey Church, but we've drawn a lot of tattoo artists into this place. And I love the people that come here that have creative gifts and they express them. But I know that Jimmy didn't just wake up one day and get this reputation as one of the better tattoo artists in our community just by starting to scratch on people's arms and hope that it worked out the best, right? It took training and discipline and practice and figuring out the tools and the designs and the preparation and the planning. And guess what? He gets to freehand some stuff now. But that's not because he's just winging it. That's after developing the training and the skill necessary to get to that point in life where he can put ink on people's bodies that stays in a creative expression of who God has created them to be and what they want to communicate to the world. But Jimmy didn't just wake up one day and say, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to freehand it. He started somewhere, and he started practicing, and he learned the disciplines. He learned how to be artistic with his artwork. But then he learned the principles for tattooing people and what it takes to make things that last and stick and work. In the same way, Jesus gives us the first rule for an authentic life in Matthew chapter 22. Now, I'm using this because these are words from Jesus, but they point straight back to the Old Testament, where for thousands of years people had been living according to these rules. And the religious leaders in Jesus' day, they were trying to trick him. They were trying to trap him and say, see, I knew you didn't have it all straight. And yet Jesus says this in Matthew 22, verse 36, Teacher, what's the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and the greatest commandment. Now, to be honest, I'm excited for where we're headed in this series, looking at some of the principles that we can live by so that we may live into an authentic life. But when we start with this first rule, it's the one that you least want to hear from me in particular. He's like, you're a preacher. You're supposed to tell me that. That's true. That's my job, to tell you to love God with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength. I'm supposed to demonstrate. I'm supposed to set the example in that as well. But that's the first rule that we're encouraged to live by. We're supposed to live as though we'll meet God one day. And that's a way that you can live regardless, even if you're in the point of still exploring faith, not sure about Jesus, not sure about the Bible. What if you were to choose to live your life, regardless of whether the story is true or not, that you might meet God one day? That idea changes everything for us. Because if we might meet God one day and we might have to give account for our lives one day, we have the opportunity to honor God with our present. Be accountable for the way that we used our time and our talents and our treasure and our energy, how we treated the people around us, what we did with the skills that we had. Jesus says the greatest commandment is to love God with everything that we have. My hope is that if you lived your life as though you might meet God one day, at the end of it, in that encounter, you might say, I tried my best to love you with everything that I had. My heart, my soul, my mind, that my thoughts were about you, that my first inclination was to love you, that I used my talent for you. That would be our first rule to live by, that we might meet God someday. And that our response might be, I tried to be obedient to what mattered most in loving our Creator well. In the Old Testament, it actually lays the groundwork for this rule in Deuteronomy chapter 6. This was like the mantra that the people of Israel in the Old Testament were supposed to live their lives by. It wasn't just for them, but it was for their kids and their grandkids and their communities. It says this, these are the commands, decrees, and the laws the Lord your God directed me to teach you to observe in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess, so that you, your children, and their children after them may fear the Lord your God as long as you live by keeping all his decrees and commands that I give you, and so that you may enjoy long life. Hear, Israel, and be careful to obey, so that it may go well with you, and that you may increase greatly in a land flowing with milk and honey, just as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, promised you. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates. And I think we hear those last words, you're like, well, that seems like a little overkill. I'm supposed to have it like written up here, and I'm supposed to have them right here, and I'm supposed to see them as soon as I get home, and I'm supposed to see them as I'm leaving home. It seems like a little bit of overkill, but if you go back, do you hear God's desires for his people? He talks about how he wants them to live in a land that is good. And he wants to bless them. And he wants to prosper them. If you want to say this, he wants them to live into the fullness of the creativity which he's made them for. He wants them to use their time and their talent so that they might live as expressions of a creative God. But how do we get there? How do we live that way? It's when we get the first rule in order. That's that God matters more than anything else, that God should be first and foremost in our lives and in our families and in our communities. It's as if we should live as though we might meet God one day and give an account for what we did with the life that he gave us, with the relationships that he gave us, the talents that he gave us, the resources that he gave us, that we get to make an account for that. And this only makes sense in a worldview that says that we are created for more than just the pleasures of this life. Because if it's only about the pleasures of this life, eat and drink and be merry and enjoy life. But we go back to the beginning of Genesis. We believe that God created us for relationship, perfect relationship with himself. Sin came and it destroyed it all and it fractured it all. And one of the consequences of sin is our own death, if you will. That we all have to face our mortality. That sin has infected our entire world and our creativity and our relationships and our time and our power and all of these things. And so often we can see ways that we manipulate or misuse what God has given us. That's the result of sin. But the hope of Jesus is that he has created us for life beyond this one. And that we will meet God again someday. And for those who have been redeemed in Jesus, we may get to live in eternity with God as these creative beings that he has made us to be. The Lord's desire is to bless us and to prosper us. But it starts by knowing who he is and keeping him as first in our lives. There's one God worth serving. Let's not forget that. Make it so apparent in your life as though it's tied to you and it's like on your forehead, so when you look in the mirror, you don't forget it, and that when you return home, you're reminded of it as well. Make sure your kids know this. Make sure their kids know it. Make sure your neighbors know it and your friends know it. That there's one true God for each of us. This goes back to the story in Exodus where the Israelites had been brought out of slavery in Egypt, and they wandered in the wilderness as God formed them into the kind of people that he would want them to be. And Moses went up on Mount Sinai to meet with God, and God gave him these tablets of stone, the rules that his people are supposed to live by. We don't like rules these days. We oftentimes want to try to do our own thing. And those of you who know me well know that I have a saying about rules. Rules are good for other people. Because I don't like rules. I like to get around rules and tweak rules. But the truth is, God has given us some rules so that we might experience our best life. And Exodus 20, verse 3 gives us commandment number 1. Rule number 1, God says, you shall have no other gods before me. And some of you, that might be the first time you've ever heard the first commandment. And some of you are like, I've heard that a million times in my life. But the temptation that we see in our world, especially right now, is there can be so many other things that we put before God. So many distractions, so many idols, so many other priorities that we put before God in our lives. That comes to the demands of work, that comes priorities in relationships, that comes to the way that we experience recreation in our own lives. I think about these little idol machines that we all carry around in our pockets that continually crave our attention and demand that we watch and listen and get our most important forms of information from them. They are like little pocket idols for so many of us, including myself, because they're craving our attention. God says, nope, no other gods before me. The book of Proverbs is wisdom literature. It's what's been guiding my life for so many years. And the book of Proverbs is all about a father writing to his son and said, this is the way you should live your life if you want to experience success and blessing and joy and prosperity. Follow my instructions. And specifically, the first part of the book of Proverbs, it's just this plea to get wisdom. Like over and over and over and over again, it says, if you get nothing else in this world, get wisdom. And I think about the world that we live in. There is unlimited information, and yet there's so little wisdom. I actually had a conversation a couple weeks ago with a friend of mine that I love and I care a lot about, but I've just been seeing make some decisions that are kind of confusing, and from a distance, like, hey, it doesn't seem like the things that you're doing right now are expressing a lot of wisdom. The decisions you're making seem to be short-circuiting the plans that you want to see come true in your life. And this is what Proverbs 9:10 says. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. That's why for some of us that have grown up in this tech age, this information age, when you can sit with somebody that maybe doesn't have a smartphone or maybe doesn't have a cell phone at all, has maybe just kind of lived a humble and a simpler life, but knows the Scriptures and is able to express this relationship with God. It's like so foreign and so desirable and so unique. I've got a mentor of mine that almost every time I text him how he's doing, all he does is send Scripture back to me. The beauty of the joy of God who sustains and blesses and provides and is with us in the good days and the hard days. That's the kind of life that seems truly unique to me as somebody that knows God, that walks with God, that experiences a wisdom that our world does not know. It's the kind of life that Daniel lived in the Old Testament of the Bible. Daniel was this man of incredible talent, and he developed this reputation. Even though he was a foreigner in a foreign land, he developed this reputation for having wisdom and skill and ability to communicate on behalf of God in a way that other people were just amazed at. And yet Daniel, there was one thing that he was resolved. He was not going to bow down to the other idols or kings or gods that the nation that he lived in was doing. And his life was under threat because of that. That people wanted him to become like them, to worship their king, their idols, their gods. And Daniel refused, to the point that you might have heard the story about the lion's den, right? He was thrown in the lion's den. You'd expect him to be eaten, and yet he was not. His friends in the fiery furnace that were thrown in, they should have been consumed, and yet were not. God was working in Daniel's life in such a miraculous way that the king of the region that had called upon Daniel time and time again as a consultant finally gave way. King Darius thought of himself as a god, and yet he's the one that expresses this decree in Daniel chapter 6. He says, I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel, for he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. So here's King Darius saying, I've seen what's happening in the world, and I've come to believe that the God that Daniel worships is the one true God, the only one worth worshiping, the only one worth prioritizing. And rule number one should be there are no other gods before this God. He's a living God. He's the true God. And we all will have the opportunity to stand before and give an account for our lives someday. And if we live our lives as though we might meet God someday, it changes our priorities, it changes our relationships, it changes what we do with our time and our talents and our gifting. And I think about it specifically when it comes into relationship with creativity. If we're trying to live a unique or an authentic life apart from a relationship with our Creator, all we can possibly do is live in imitation. Because God is a creative God that's created you on purpose and for purpose. He's given you a sense of creativity, and He wants you to be one of one. But apart from His voice in your life, apart from His guidance, apart from obedience to the rules that He has laid out from us, all we can try to do is imitate or copy other people. Instead, what is it God has gifted you for? You will find your best life when you understand that God has created you for creativity, whether that's craftsmanship, whether that's artistically or musically, or maybe that's in the kitchen, what you can make for others. Maybe that's in the way that you approach relationships, and you maybe are a one of one in other people's lives, saying, you're not like the rest of my friends or neighbors or co-workers. God has created you to be an expression of His creativity. And I just want to invite you, as we're beginning this series, Freehand, maybe to consider a few steps along the way with us. The first is to try Alpha. I'm looking at some of you that I've invited to Alpha before. And I don't know, I don't see. Alpha is a word that just means beginning. It could be the beginning of something new in your life. Maybe a new friendship, a new relationship, a new conversation. Maybe it's the beginning of a real understanding of what God has done in your life and done for you. If you haven't been through Alpha, what do I need to say? Try it. Show up on Wednesday night. Try it with us. We're not going to bug you if we never see you again. But it's worth the effort, isn't it? Take a risk and try Alpha with us. Or, like Jenny said, invite somebody. Maybe Alpha is something that's made a difference in your life. Maybe that all it takes to change somebody else's life is an invite to Alpha on Wednesday night. That you might invite somebody to try it with you. It could be the beginning of somebody understanding the true Creator God and that relationship He's made us for. One of the things I just want you to maybe consider, I'm not going to really give you a lot of guidance for it this morning, but I think some of the things that some of us are so captured by are our social media feeds and our devices, that really we have an addiction issue to them. And in the weeks ahead, we'll talk about it, but maybe there's an opportunity to plan a digital detox or a digital fast, if you will, to sort of say, this thing is controlling my mind and my thoughts and my hearts. And I need to spend some time maybe you do that with a friend, or maybe some people in your group. Maybe you jump into a venture group for the first time. We had a little bit of a break this last month as we were going through our prayer guide, but we're back in with our venture group questions being available on the YouVersion Bible app. But one of the ways we take steps in this is with other people in relation to praying for and encouraging and walking alongside. Jenny talked about her role as a Next Steps director. If you aren't in a venture group and want to be, or you want to start a venture group, talk to her. She will help you get that going. Last month we did a prayer guide, and you could revisit this month. And asking through prayer, saying, God, would you be working in my life? Would you show me more about what you want from me? How can I be obedient to your guidance in my life? And how can I really live an authentic life? And one of the other ways I would encourage you is to maybe even get an old-fashioned Bible, one of these ones that has words on paper rather than on your phone, and read through the book of Proverbs. It's been a great guide for me in my own life. It talks about what it looks like for us to prioritize this relationship with God and really to find wisdom. There's 31 Proverbs, so if you're in a month and you just pick the day of the month and just read through it, it works like a calendar, if you will. So if you wanted to start today, you'd be in Proverbs chapter 6, and you could read to the end of October, and you'd finish with the 31st verse. You can start it over in a new month. But Proverbs has made an incredible impact on my life, realizing that I don't need to try to dress like, sound like, be like anybody else in my life. That God wants to do something unique in me. I'm never going to look at somebody else's shoes or their clothes, but I want to be like that. I'm never going to worry about trying to be an imitation. Just say, God, what do you want to do in my life? And God wants to do the exact same thing in your life. But you don't have to just try to wing it free-handed on your own. He's given us rules to live by. The first, so we're encouraged to live as if we might meet God someday. That changes everything for us. Would you pray with me? God, we thank you for the guidance that you give us in your scriptures, that even though some of us bristle at the idea of rules because we don't want to be boxed in, the truth is that obedience to your rules is the foundation for an authentic life. Because you want us to live a life connected to you, our Creator, and our creativity overflows from our spirituality, God. That really we understand and we live by and we understand your love as we're connected to you. God, would you give us the courage to live our lives as though we might meet you someday again? So we be responsible for, give account for the way we use our time, our talent, our treasure, our gifts, and our relation. We love you, and we thank you for who you are. Amen.
Don't hold it against me that Jimmy and I are dressed alike today. I invite you to stand with us. I've heard 1,000 stories of what they think you're like. who breaks the power of sin and darkness, whose love is mighty and so much stronger, the King of glory, the King above all kings. Who shakes the whole earth in holy thunder and leaves us breathless in awe and wonder, the King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Who brings our chaos back into order? Who makes the orphan a son and daughter? The King of glory, the King of glory. Who brings the nation with truth and justice? Shines like the sun in all of its brilliance. The King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. You would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You lay down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, worthy, worthy. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. That you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You lay down your life, that you would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. All that you've done for me. All that you've done for me. Hey guys, thanks for coming. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.